Hey, so I want to talk to everyone today about nationalized health insurance and kind of the arguments around it, pretty much the ones against it, as well as some of the ones that are for it, and how it relates to our society. And the funniest thing that I find about the arguments against it, for it, etc., is kind of the irony that they come from when talking about a nationalized health insurance system. So the argument for the system is that it will be a silver bullet that solves all of our major societal issues. It will give everyone access to medicine, and we will be a much more successful country. I can't deny that. Countries that do have nationalized health insurance systems, Japan, Germany, England, etc., generally speaking, it does dramatically help their economy. The reason for this is that they just simply don't pay as much for medicine. The reality is that they pay much less, and consequently, their quality of living is much higher, their life expectancy is higher, etc. It's always funny to me when I'm hearing these arguments for how to live longer in the United States, and the thing that always comes up is these odd health regimens, etc., of how you're going to live longer. And the thing that I always find humorous is that we don't talk about the fact that the reason other people live in other countries live longer, Germany and Japan, good examples, is because they have these nationalized systems that catch deadly diseases much early because people aren't afraid to go to the doctor. I was kind of one of these people that was always afraid to go to the doctor. And when I was in a country that had nationalized health insurance and I was working there, this was in Taiwan, I also did that. I was afraid to go to the doctor still, and I went to it less than I wish I should have. And I was always kind of impressed by their system. So even though I come from kind of a macroeconomics, free market kind of generally think that's a positive system, it is one of these systems in the United States that is deeply flawed and has been monopolized and is become entirely corrupt. And the reality is that our system is broken and it needs to be fixed. So how do we fix it? Well, first, we have to dismantle the arguments against it. The biggest arguments that you're going to hear is that it's a slippery slope argument towards the idea that if we have anything that's socialist in this country, it will lead towards us becoming a communist nation. I'm going to blow your minds here. Karl Marx was not the first communist socialist running around out there. In fact, if you want to talk about real socialism in the United States, you can go back to, I want to say, 1825, New Haven, Indiana. It was a new state at the time, or province actually, as the United States was expanding westward. And believe it or not, it is one of the earliest attempts at having a social communal lifestyle. And it didn't pan out, but that is a huge part of American history. A huge part of socialism's history is rooted in the American Midwest in the 1820s. Shockingly, even though it started there, guess what? America didn't turn fully communist by, the 1890s. So what does that mean? It means that these slippery slope arguments are often done because they're made to scare people. Images of the Soviet Union during the 1930s and 40s or 50s pop into people's heads. Books like 1984, even though ironically, I don't think many people who have ever quote that book have actually ever read it. And these otherwise Orwellian images come to people's mind, right? And it's a scare tactic. And I say slippery slope because it's always implied that if we have one thing that's socialist, the whole country will go communist. I'm going to really blow your minds here and tell you that when you drove to work today, it was on a socialist road. When you dropped your kid off at public school, it's a socialist system. Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, the VA, all of that is socialism. Public libraries, etc. But we haven't suddenly and overnight turned towards communism, even though there are all these socialist systems within our country. So that argument is baloney. It's false, it's crap. Don't listen to it. What is the real reason that, especially on the conservative right, we see these arguments? Now, people like to throw around the word lobbyist a lot, but often that's not explained what that is. give a better explanation. To run for re-election in the United States is incredibly expensive, and you can donate money to people's election. And by doing that, you manage to help re-elect that person. This is what companies do in the United States. The other thing that they can do is insider trading. So if there is a known sell-off of stocks, etc., within an industry, people in the House and Senate can be tipped off anonymously, and they sell their shares, etc. It's probably the reason why most people in the Senate and House make about 30% on the stock market every year, which is insane. Like, it should not be allowed, but it is. It's because there's no oversight of the Senate and House. This is reality. They oversee themselves. And both Republicans and Democrats are equally to blame for this. So for any of the liberal people watching this video, realize your side is just as at fault for this. Unless you're Bernie Sanders, he's independent. But the point is, that is the system that we currently have. And the health insurance industry props up predominantly Republicans and a few Democrats. So those are the people who fight that argument. And the reality is, even within the last 100 years, people like Nixon, who once kind of pushed for some form of nationalized health insurance and very quickly stopped, even Republicans were sometimes for it. The reality is that it's money and it's lobbying. And that's why the right pushes it, even though it's to the detriment of the people that they serve. So what do we do? How do we get this system into our government? Like, how do we actually have nationalized insurance? And will it cause us to turn communist? I hope with all the examples I've given you of actual socialized programs in our country, you see that it will not. And here's another thing. A big argument from the right that I often see used as a scare tactic is Canada's healthcare system. Now, they won't bring up Japan or Germany or England or any of those systems that are also nationalized, because that's a losing argument, because the people who live there love those systems. The problem is, Canadians complain very loudly about the slow wait times. And it's very easy to talk to a Canadian and they can complain about their healthcare system. Keep in mind, I know many Canadians who have emigrated to the United States who used to crap on their healthcare system, and as soon as they emigrated to the United States, missed it desperately. So keep in mind, it's a matter of perspective. A long wait time is still a wait time. You're still getting care, versus in the United States, there's roughly 10% of the population that has no health insurance. Keep that in mind. That is a larger population than all of Canada. So it really puts things in perspective that, yes, Canadians can complain about their healthcare system, but that still doesn't make it worse than ours. In fact, it is many times better. I will always argue that any system that claims to be better than another, that has people that just aren't receiving care, is a fairly flawed argument. If there are tens of millions of people suffering from, horrible diseases in your country, which we currently have, and we're not doing anything about, this is an issue. And that's the argument I always hear about Canada. The other argument I hear is that it will be so incredibly expensive for our system that we will not be able to financially support it with the amount of money that we have in the United States, which is kind of a rich argument for the wealthiest country in the world. It's really rich when you consider we spend with congressional spending, almost $1 trillion on our military annually. So keeping all of that in mind, why do they say it's so expensive? Why would it be so expensive? It's because Americans have a lot of chronic healthcare problems, typically, and the largest one being obesity. Then comes alcoholism and smoking, which are expensive to treat. But here's the thing, is if you think about your body from the perspective of it being a car, Americans are the sort of people that have not gotten the oil changed in their car ever because it's too expensive for them and their car literally is falling apart, as where Europeans have routine maintenance and their costs are relatively low. So, yes, there would be a lot of an initial high cost to the system because for the last 40 years, the American healthcare system has been so piss poor that people have not been taking care of themselves. We've also defunded public health, so the reality is people are not in good shape. This is just reality. So yes, it will be expensive at first, and over time, it should become much less expensive. And this is the argument that I like to use with people that kind of come from the argument of it is going to be expensive, aside from the fact we're the wealthiest country in the world, and that's a BS argument. It is that, yes, it will be expensive, but will be cheaper in the long run. So looking at that and kind of going back to my point, well, how do we get this system? The reality is we can't go off shooting healthcare CEOs. That doesn't solve anything. It just makes them hire more private security. The reality is that more people need to become involved in their political party, or they need to form their own new political party to push for this. The reality is that lobbyists have infected political parties so rampantly that either an injection of new blood is necessary or the formation of a new party, which are the party one is fairly unlikely. I hate to tell you this, we live in a two-party system. It's just the reality that we have created for ourselves because our founding fathers hated the idea of parties. They accidentally led to the creation of a government that has very strict parties in their country. So how do you get involved in your political party? If you're Democrat or Republican, the easiest thing you can do is try and go onto a website and try and join together. And the most realistic thing that's going to happen is you're going to be sent an email to tell you to donate money, or you're going to be asked to do phone calls. Those people calling for Kamala or Trump, etc., who are sitting on some couch somewhere sending out these texts. That's not true engagement. True engagement is going back to the systems that we had in the 1960s and the 1950s. And that involves meeting up with other fellow Democrats, talking about the issues, and forming groups. That is the way that we make real change. Social clubs used to be a huge part of the United States, and having these social groups of Democrats and Republicans, and that used to talk to each other and go to each other's meetings and talk with each other about how to make things better in their community, that needs to return. Isolation on technology is really the thing that cuts us apart. And while it might bring us together, and you're seeing my video right now, you're not actually interacting with people on the right or the left. You're isolated to the few people that are also on here with you, and talking in person to other people is how this is going to be solved, and forming these groups. So there are still social groups that actually exist, political groups in most major cities and even small towns. The reality is, though, their membership is low, and they are predominantly very old people. And believe it or not, this is where we need to start. And I especially push for millennials and for Gen Z and Gen A to get involved, to start going to these meetings in person, not online, having real discussions about it and getting involved. Health insurance is one of these issues that needs to be done in person. The reality is that too much money has infected politics for this system. Calling your representative isn't going to do very much. You can do it, and I certainly encourage it, but I truly don't believe it is going to sway them, because either you're calling someone who already believes in what you're saying, or you're calling to someone who doesn't give a crap about what you're saying and doesn't want to because they want the money to line their next re-election campaign. This is the reality. So, meet in your communities, reach out to other communities, get involved, have it be with your church group, have it be with your D&D group, have it be with any of these groups that you interact with, that you care about this topic, health insurance for all. That's what you need to do. And you need to vote. Voter turnout is another major key issue. And I think, especially these last couple elections, we truly should see by now, especially for those of us who want a nationalized health insurance system, how valuable turnout is. So my word to you is mobilize. Not just on your phone, not just over Facebook or Discord or whatever social media platform you use. You need to actually talk to people. Peace out.